Morning coffee hour with Dirk McGurk, Ashtarothi, McLeod. These guys are going to hang out with me as we talk about what's in the news with EVE Online, but also what's in real life news, because we always talk about all the stuff that influences EVE Online. So welcome. I'm going to do a little bit of alerting other people so they can join us as well, and we can talk about all these many subjects. And Dirk's writing me notes that are cracking me up, but they're not fit to be talked about.
I was wondering if I could make you laugh there in the back office.
Yeah. All right, how are you guys doing?
It's
Awesome.
Thursday. I got coffee early.
Yeah.
I'm doing great, man.
Dude, let's start with some success from Ashtarothi. What's going on with you?
The stream's going really well. I had an amazing night. What is it, Tuesday? And then now I've got more streaming coming out today. The invasions have been going really well. Up until yesterday, there was a bit of a snag. So I need to double check, but I think we had to revert back a week for the most part when it came to the rollout of invasions. So we didn't. They had to take back my major conduits basically, and I can get more into it later. But other than that, it's been a lot of excitement, a lot of going on, a lot of good streaming, and been spending a lot of good time with people. So very, very happy. How about yourself?
Oh, great.
No stress at all.
Yeah.
Nothing happening.
Totally, yeah.
No controversies.
Totally fine.
Not on Reddit.
Yeah. Everybody's
You didn't walk into any bathrooms or anything like that, so you know.
Yeah. Oh man.
Yeah, actually,
I'm looking at the screen. What you're
showing
streaming out there, and silly question, but is there a way of stopping the agency thing from coming up every time you log?
Yeah,
there is a little checkbox. Yeah,
box in the lower right hand corner.
I'll show you over here. You see it? Oh, let me transition. There it is. So yeah, so that little.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That little box down here. Is the stop. I wish
it was right next to the close button.
Yeah, you know,
you can't stop the cancer. The agency will take over your life.
Thank you, Adama, for a subscription. Thank you.
I do want to point out, because I've been seeing this argument a lot, people complaining about the fact that the agency pops up by itself and that you have to check that in order to make it go away. All I'm going to say is that the new player, the person that will benefit the most from this feature, has no idea to open it. And therefore, it has to start opened. So that way that person can have access to it. And then the rest of us get to have that minor inconvenience such that that feature is actually useful to the demographic that really does need it. Now,
I also think, hold on, let me just say, I also think that veterans, like just veteran players of the game, whether you want it or not, it should at least pop up once for you, just so that you can see that CCP has worked on something. Like there's evidence of this having occurred.
I definitely agree. I'm just I'm trying to take like the most conservative argument, because I know that it really does upset people for some reason to have pop-ups or whatnot. I think that it's a valuable feature, and I think that people who didn't find the checkbox should probably look through the feature a little bit more thoroughly and see whether or not there's any pieces of it that might be interesting to you, because there's a lot to it, and it's got a lot of really useful information that did not used to be in the game up until the existence of this feature.
And by the way, I just want to say, I'm not complaining. I was literally asking the question because I was popping in and out of accounts yesterday, and I thought it was going to be one of those things where, like, the first time you open up that account after whatever, like it would come up, but then the next time it wouldn't, and so it was like, I don't know, I was going so fast, I was just quick glancing, so I was just asking the question. I wasn't complaining about it. I was just asking the question. How do you do this?
You were not, but there is a huge thread on Reddit where they're talking about stopping the cancer, and I guess somebody in the comments referred to it as cancer. And I need people to understand that it is a very valuable feature, even if it's not valuable to you, and that checkbox exists so that way you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Although I thought that particular cancer comment was kind of funny. That's why I read it out loud.
Yeah, that's fine.
The comedy sometimes is worth it.
But what do you guys think about the use of the word cancer all the time? All right,
I
think it's
okay.
cancer.
Jump all over me, but I think it's
No,
not.
I think it's over.
I think that
I
I think that it's unfortunate because it actually does have a meaning from a game design context, and people in Eve tend to use it wrong. Actually, people across the internet have started to use it wrong. So cancer is when your own body cells start replicating out of control until it kills the host, right? So a cancerous feature is a feature or tactic that is so apex, so good that more and more people begin to adapt that strategy until there's nothing left besides either people doing that strategy or against that strategy. That is a cancerous feature. So maybe you could argue that the Spitball is cancer as more and more people began to shift over to it. But there are
You
so
could
many
have-
things.
Is polysob cancer? I mean, like people just use these terms because,
Right.
like, they're not because they're accurate, but just because they work.
Right, but that's my problem is that a cancerous feature actually did used to have a meaning, but now it's lost a lot of that meaning because people just like to
At
use
this
it as
point,
a
it's-
synonym for bad.
Yeah, people just use it to mean I don't like this.
Hey, Fonzo,
Right.
how you doing? Well,
and sometimes you got to choose between words, right? Because, like, people have said AIDS. People have said, there's a number of
Ebola.
terminologies that were
AIDS is a
used
much
out there.
more term.
Ebola.
Yeah. Well, I'm generally against diseases, so I don't want to. Well, I think the reality is it's like anything else. Everything is innocuous until you experience it. Like if you ever had anybody close to you die of cancer, hearing cancer, this is cancer is like it's not a good memory, right? If you've had anyone die of AIDS, it's the same thing, or anyone die.
And it's also a trivialization. If you've actually experienced something like,
yeah.
like that in your life, then, having someone say, oh, clicking a checkbox is cancer, then you obviously have a strong reaction to that because they're trivializing like, the phrase or the meaning to the word.
Is it really?
Exactly.
So, Matthew Durst, who is a CSM 14 candidate for Faction Warfare and LoSec, is asking to speak.
Yeah. I like Matthew. Bring him on. He's great.
He is here.
Waiting for you to unmute him.
Oh, okay. I'll do that. Do. There he is.
I mean, I guess I could have, but
Yeah. You guys make me do all the clicking. No, I
got it.
Thank you.
Well, you did say
I know.
crew. Let me unmute people.
I know. I totally contradicted myself.
Oh, Matt.
I told my crew, please let me unmute people
There,
so
got
I
you
don't get
again.
everybody at once. And now I'm criticizing them
there
for
we go.
making me unmute people. Hey, Matthew, how are you doing?
Good. I'm just tuning into the conversation. What's going on? Something about cancer and how it's applied in game and
Let me turn you up a bit.
Yeah, applying cancer.
No, we're just,
Yeah, we really tangented.
Yeah, we already got this.
In this particular instance, people are complaining about checking a box to make something go away. That's shocking to me that people care at all.
Yeah, here it is. We'll just show you that. If we move this up, you can see there's a little checkbox at the bottom right. I'll just try to get it into.
where is it?
It does smack a little bit of manufactured outrage as far as I'm concerned.
Bottom
But
right
that's
down here.
Just check it and it goes away.
Isn't
I know,
that
right?
just an average day in EVE Online?
Yeah.
Which is why I'm suspicious.
Yeah.
Like, if this is all people have to like if there are people out there actually like genuinely perturbed over this, right? Like that's pretty low level. We should call that day a win.
That's a solid point. If the worst thing about this expansion is that people can't find the checkbox, then this might be the most successful expansion since Apocrypha.
Yeah, this is a really great filter. I think someone in chat said that players who complain about a checkbox are cancerous.
Well, just
What's
so
on the other
people
side
know.
over there? Can you scroll over to the other bottom side
Yeah.
of that screen?
Surely.
Yeah, Xylix said that in chat. The ridiculous overblowing of minor shit is a real cancer.
First world problems. Exactly.
There's the other side.
Now, to be fair, because we like to be fair and balanced TM,
Oh my God.
So I did hear on the somebody talked on the subreddit about the fact that under certain resolutions of screens, the checkbox is actually pushed off of the screen, and so it's not
Oh.
visible
That
right
is a bug.
away.
That is a
And-
bug.
Well, that's my point. If that's happening, then I can see where that's the frustration. This is one of the biggest problems in game design, is that often the complaint doesn't actually match the problem, right? It's not the fact that they have to check it. It's the fact that that checkbox is not immediately obvious. And from our perspective, we could just be like, well, then look. But from their perspective, they're like, we did. You know what I'm saying? So you have to get past the complaint to the real problem.
This is something that I wanted to bring up actually during the campaign for CSM, because I talk about the game and its complexity and all that other stuff. But for the amount of complexity in EVE Online, we have precious few settings, don't we? That's kind of a
I do
leading question.
believe
Settings, as in configuration for the client.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
I
endless. I
mean-
mean, look at overview, look at brackets. I mean, it's incredible.
if they
Well,
made
overview and brackets are like really, really like
It's an art.
super fine details in one aspect of it. But like, for example, if I wanted to set my the windows that I have up a particular way for PvP, but then I want to change that and have even a different different resolution and a different sort of sort of display mode and different windows of different sizes. Like I can't set that up to be like
Yeah,
a
that is frustrating.
Oh,
the lack of UI customization is one of the biggest problems in EVE,
I think
honestly.
one of the things I don't like is when you're multi-boxing. Like for me, if I'm multi-boxing with combat alts, then I have to every time set the HUD to like the zoom. I have to go like 150%, and I just put the HUD and like the broadcast history window on my alts. And then like when you log off and you log back onto your main, everything's like back at 150%. Everything's zoomed in, and it's like you have to change it back every time. And then when you log in your alts, they're whatever your main was. The settings don't like
Have you
keep.
seen the process of copying your settings, your entire UI settings and game configuration to another account or another tune? It's not simple. Like it's simple for me because I'm in tech and I can figure this stuff out. But
Speak up, please.
expecting a regular user to be able to copy those settings easily is very, very difficult.
All that said, there is actually a tool in the launcher that allows you to have multiple configurations and swap between them relatively easily, and like port them over when they upgrade the launcher, for example.
Yeah, I was gonna say, isn't that just what launch groups are and what profiles are?
Launch
Right.
groups are which clients start at what time.
No,
The
but I'm sorry,
profiles include the settings.
what accounts?
Right. Yes. Now, what I was talking about is, so like for instance, yes, you can have different profiles with different overview settings, which is great, and broadcast settings, which is great if you have, like, for instance, like me, I have a Logi profile, I have a 2-screen profile, I have a 1-screen profile, so on and so forth. So that way, depending on what I'm wanting to do, I launch it under that profile, and everything's configured to be what I need it to be. That being said, no matter which one of those I run, I only have one overview. I can't make different stacks of things and put different information in different ones, so that way I can put them next to each other and contrast them. I can't customize what information appears below the ships that I have locked, so that way the information that I feel is relevant to me is where it needs to be. I don't have ways of making sure that the UI is communicating to me in a way that I understand what is happening to my ship and my targets. And I think that ultimately makes EVE complex in a way that isn't great.
There's also a lot of limitation in terms of what you can do to an individual UI element. So for
Correct.
instance, the display in the upper left-hand corner that has all of your timers, your drug timers and aggression timers and all that, that has your route, that has your current location, that has all that information, that entire block cannot be moved ever. And I even messaged CCP Carker about that. I was like, hey, could you make this block just have like a thing on it, just like the you know how the locked targets have that little bug you can grab and move it around. I figured, hey, this is another information block that looks the same. It's a similar UI element. Chances are they could make it movable. And I got an immediate response from her saying, nope, never happening.
Could be.
Yeah, it's the relationship with the UI is very odd. One of the things that struck me the most when I switched over here from WoW, yes, go back to WoW's out of the way. That was like 9 years ago, guys. That ship has sailed. But the customizability of the WoW UI, I think, is honestly one of the reasons why WoW stood out among all of the rest of the clones. And what also happened was that those mods became kind of like a fertile experimentation ground that Blizzard could pluck from and say, hey, this feature actually ends up being super cool and everyone's using it. And so we're going to incorporate it into the main UI. And I think that that's one of the reasons why the World of Warcraft UI and really that entire genres of UI has evolved so much more than other genres and Eve's UI. For example, the idea of movable bars didn't exist for a long time, and then add-on makers kept putting out customizable bars for World of Warcraft and be able to make it so that you have more than 2 bars or whatever it was. And then eventually they were like, you know what, that's a really cool idea. So they put in more and more bars into the thing, and now future games allow you to move them around. You know, these kinds of flexibilities, like the designers of the game can only design so well, right? Like they can only go for one design, and they can thumbnail it, and they can figure out why they want it, but they only get to really put out one strategy, first of all. And second of all, they can only, because of that, they can only cater to so many different user groups, right? There are so many different kinds of players in this game. And therefore, when you have something locked, that might mean something totally different to a salvager than a combat pilot to a mining ship. And so the same data, the same information doesn't apply. So I would argue that EVE Online needs more customization than other
Absolutely.
games.
That's
And since
the
it gets
problem-
less, it ends up becoming a huge
But
problem.
that's the point. I feel like a game. I mean, if you play SimCity or if you play, I don't play these games, but Sim Life or whatever these games are that are simulation games or games that are really complex, there are a ton of things that you can tweak in the game to make the game work. I don't mean just UI, but I just mean preferences in general.
The problem that we run into with the Eve UI is that they like to keep it very locked down in general to prevent botting, to prevent abuse in general, to prevent automation, and they've chosen where to draw the line, and this is where they've drawn it. So that is one concern that keeps things the way they are. The other concern is, as you said, World of Warcraft is an excellent example of a highly mutable user interface. I have built entire UIs from scratch, like using add-ons that other people created, but starting with a blank screen, no interface whatsoever, built completely from the ground up. And the reason that was possible is because there's millions and millions and millions of World of Warcraft subscribers, and you're going to find more developers in that crowd than you're going to find in Eve. And Blizzard has more pool to choose from, more work out there to look at than CCP does.
But do they actually allow modification, mods, and stuff?
Yeah, so they have
any mods. No mods.
Or they
yeah, they have an entire system where you can build mods via Lua, and there are very specific rules. Basically, just like there's an Eve API, they have like almost a mod API that allows modders to access data, display data, however they want.
So do other games,
improved
right?
it over the years too.
Like this is
Correct.
part of a strategy of gaming companies is to put out an interface that people can use to enhance the game and make it better, and then you're opening up community development. Or CCP seems to only let community development happen outside the client through third-party sites like Eve Mogul or Fuzzworks.
Right. And Fansui hit on the nail on the head for the primary concern, which is that if the more customization that you give it, the more power that you give to people who want to automate it, or more tools in their tool bag. Although I would argue that fight is obviously already being lost. So really, we're just missing out on something.
Don't make it worse.
The other problem is,
and not only that, controls where your focus is. They want you to focus at a specific level, and add-ons will give you more information or less information and make you, it'll change your level of focus. And they have decided, we want you to pay attention to this, this, and this, and not that, that, and that.
All right, I want to
So
move
that's an
this on.
interesting point.
I want to move this on. Let's wrap this up real quick. It's related,
Well-
but it's a different question. Go ahead, Ash. You were finishing.
Yeah, the other point is that it's also just super hard. Like that is a huge technical challenge to make. The more customizable the UI, the more challenging that task becomes. Because like if something's movable, now you have to have a whole UI for the customization aspect of things, and everything actually has to be able to work no matter where they go. Blah 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 blah. So I mean, there's a huge technical challenge on top of everything. So if you're going to take on that technical challenge for something that may be a mixed bag, I don't know if they're going to buy it.
All right.
Sorry.
All right, moving on. This is related. Dirk, come back. Where's your coffee?
I'm here.
All right, good.
I'm like chatting.
This is, yeah, I know. I see you totally active in chat channel. This is something that I had discussed with a friend of mine, who I appreciate his opinions. And we were talking about how the CSM was initially set up like in 2001 as a concept, and it didn't really get implemented until they tried to set something up, at least write some guidelines in 2003, when the game actually started. And then later, they and there was basically this, that the CSM would be a natural outcropping of a virtual society, that you would need a government of players to be able to correspond with the devs who create the world. That was just something that would be a natural, something that they would naturally evolve to. And then you had some mistrust happen over basically devs and players being too intertwined. That was called the T20 incident. And the specifics of that are all over the place, and you can ask me privately. I won't go into it, but essentially there was a big outrage about devs helping players gain advantage, and that was unfair. And what you had then was you had a mixture of like, let's dust off this idea that we had of the CSM and put it out there, and we'll say, look, we're responding to criticism, and now we're giving you oversight. And so CSM became two things. One is an oversight group, but that was more of a PR stunt, really, right? And then it was also a general PR stunt because you have democracy in a virtual world, which is kind of an interesting concept. And then the third concept was actual, let's call it QC, what would that be? Focus group kind of.
Yeah, focus
players.
group is what they really represent.
Yeah. Well, that's evolved,
well,
though, right?
No. Yeah, I mean, like, okay. So the focus group aspect, I think, actually, that is the thing that existed prior to what we came to know as the Council of Stellar Management. Okay, now I don't have any evidence for how it existed other than hearsay and things like that, right? Like I've never seen a document, I've never seen something that said this is how we selected people for it. It was kind of. It was early days. It was like early days of known beta testers or people they knew, kind of a thing, right? When you look at what happened in the aftermath of the T20 scandal and the creation of what we now know to be the Council of Stellar Management, first and foremost, it was supposed to be a conduit for players to have representation to CCP. I'm going to use the term as a form of protecting player rights in some ways. Okay. And I understand people out there can say, well, players have no rights, blah, blah. Okay. There is sort of an inherent idea that the company shouldn't fuck the players over. Like employees of the company shouldn't do the things that led to T20. And, it created a conduit to sort of, I don't want to call it oversight because they don't have oversight, but at least there was a mechanism for being able to provide feedback on things that maybe were, hurting the players. Right now, I believe that it has expanded to these other things that are more focus group like. All right. And maybe that has taken the dominant position now, just as it has evolved over the years. But that's how it originated. It didn't originate just as a bring in players here to, tell us how to fix the game. It was the other thing.
Yeah, well, it was let me finish not analogy, but what I've read in history, because I went reading and researching about this. The thing is that the devs only interact, and this is going to sound very foreign to what we have today, but this is at least how they laid it out. the devs really only interact with the universe that they have created through the EULA. That's where they step in and chase out violators of the EULA, and that's where they enforce things as judges. But other than that, they leave this sandbox to be judged and run by the players. And so this CSM is supposed to be like something of a safety valve for that. And so we were thinking, and this was what I wanted to ask, if you have the players running and constructing, I mean, a true democracy would be that the players are actually constructing or building the construct, right? That they actually have a lot of influence on the way things are developed and what gets done. And then you would really see political fights for position in the CSM from the various interested parties.
I would just like to read from the white paper.
Which white paper? They've been developed so many times.
Original.
The one that's currently on cdn1.eveonline.com/community/csm/csm
So the latest
white paper.
white paper. Yeah.
Probably. I don't know. They keep their websites. It's this white paper.
It's okay. There's been like 8 or 9 of them, but okay. Let's
I
assume
know.
it's the
I think
latest.
this is the most recent one.
Yeah.
So CCP's vision. CCP considers the Council of Stellar Management a vital part of game development. The Council is included in the development process to ensure that feedback and opinions of EVE Online players are brought to the attention of the development team and that viewpoints of the members of EVE community across all demographics of playstyle are represented and heard. The mission of the CSM delegates is to voice ideas, concerns, and feedbacks from their voters to CCP. CSM delegates will be included in early in the design process to help shape final features. After features are shipped, delegates can forward community feedback to CCP. CSM delegates do not vote on features directly, but can offer opinions on community sentiment regarding the game's direction and future prioritization. And then in part 2, they have rules and rights. So there are 3 rights of the players. The freedom from undue external influences. First, individuals have the right to be free of undue external influences in the virtual society. 2,
wow, they got to put some meat on those bones, but go ahead.
Yep. Unlimited interaction with other individuals. Next, individuals have the right to unlimited interaction with other individuals within the virtual society. And right 3, individual influence on how society is legalized. Finally, individuals have the right to influence how society is legislated.
So this is the latest white paper, right?
That's my understanding.
That was one of the things that Zanuria helped, basically iterate on.
Okay, somebody.
Maybe not though, because this one only goes up to CSM 10.
Yeah, I don't know
If it's
that's
not, then
nice.
CCP needs to definitely update their stuff.
I had thought that the original white paper, okay, what was referred to as the white paper, was retired in favor of a really trimmed down version of the language that you just see on the web. Remember when it was that freaking college level homework project of like how society evolved and
that's the one I liked.
Well, hold on. It was great from that perspective, but it put no meat on the bones of what the CSM was there to do, what its responsibilities were, what it was held to account for in various.
I think it was largely ceremonial when it started.
It says historically the CSM was governed by a white paper. While it is no longer in use, you can find it here. So what I just read from was the last white paper.
Yeah, and that's been changed to whatever was in the blog, basically. And the blog basically,
I'll link it.
Yeah, the blog basically says 3 things, and it's essentially what you said, but maybe worded a bit differently. Players influence features and can give feedback on features. They don't influence them, but they get to have feedback on features. They get to talk to players about their feelings on stuff that has been released. So it's stuff that will be released, stuff that has been released, and then the third one. I think the third one is basically development path.
Getting feedback on EVE development. Yeah, there's getting feedback on EVE development priorities and long-term roadmap, discussing ideas, theory, and design approaches with the potential of EVE Online features, and getting feedback on features in active development.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's where I'm interested in personally, because the development path is something I feel like is is doing really well in CCP's hands, and I'm afraid CSM is going to mess it all up.
Holy snarky.
Yeah,
Well,
totally.
I didn't realize that CSM members got 5 free accounts.
They get 5 free accounts? Wow. That's a lot.
I thought it was 1.
Yeah, I thought
Yeah, I didn't realize that either.
Matterall's true motivation revealed.
It's under the benefit
yeah, absolutely.
CSM
You know,
members.
Can they
Can't-
gift those?
can't take your vote back now. No, that's how. That's exactly what my whole campaign's been about anyway from the beginning. You could just tell that I was like, yeah, you know, when the CSM feels like they're being listened to, that's usually when things are being manipulated by the players. And part of me is like, that's pretty cool because, you know, you have a virtual universe that is created by the players themselves. That's very futuristic. And all CCP does, all they are, is the hand that creates. They're not necessarily the architects. They're just responding to the needs of the players. But the players elect the government that creates the game that they live in. And
They would call themselves the janitors.
But
Yeah,
right now, like the
but-
CSM feels like the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, and then anybody who's not nullsec is like one of those minor parties. And so it's like
yeah,
we're the representation is like I don't feel like it's always been there.
It hasn't once the representation on a broader base hasn't been there since organized groups decided to organize not just for in-game but also organize for voting. Okay, you know, so you can go back
Like
to
block
I don't know. You know,
ballots.
well, I mean, you know, look, you go back to the early United States. Okay, and I'm just using this as an example, right? You know, when the party system didn't exist, and they really didn't think that the party system would ever exist, and then next thing they knew, the party system existed.
Yeah.
Well, but anyway, that's the roadmap is important there, but also what they're actually building and then communicating feedback from the players. That's all that
Well, I
stuff
think it's
is
really
important.
hard to. You can communicate feedback from the players, but I think it's really hard to communicate from the devs to the players because of the restrictiveness of the NDA, and I don't feel there's a lot of transparency with that. Like,
Well, I think
where
that's very
is Nova?
isolated. The examples I've seen are very isolated, where a feature is talked about in a dev blog, and then you receive information on that. I don't think you translate what devs are doing necessarily. I don't think I haven't seen examples of that in a direct way.
Well, I mean, like,
Well, I can think of a couple of examples
Okay.
off the top of my head in which the CSM basically was like, we can't tell you what it is, but we're super excited.
I hate
or
that. That's so
along those
bad.
lines.
That's so bad. That's so bad.
When you see the captain's quarters, you'll understand.
Such amateur hour on the CSM when they do that.
And that is my question. Like, what is the primary communication priority for any given CSM member, right? Do you feel your job is to communicate our wishes to CCP, or is your goal to I guess communicate outward an assurance that the inside is not on fire?
And that's a philosophical question to everyone.
Yeah, well, no, it's a question that I ponder about each candidate, and and I actually ask a few of them in my interviews and stuff. Like, if you're in a position where you're unhappy about what the CCP is doing, and they're clearly ignoring what your feedback is, and you have grave trouble about what it is, would you bring it to the population? How would you bring it to the population?
well, that's the thing. Does the NDA, like me, what I did with the Faction Warfare Committee is the proposals are there, and I'm bringing those proposals, and the people know I'm bringing those proposals to CCP.
Correct.
What the proposals that people are making at the minutes, some of it's blocked by the NDA. Obviously, some of the discussions blocked by the NDA, so people don't really know what the CSM is really advocating for.
Well, anyway, so
if that makes sense.
I brought that up earlier because I thought it was very interesting that you can look at the CSM with as just a ceremonial group, which it kind of was maybe when it started. It seemed like it was very much a popularity contest that a lot of people thought they have no influence. And so what's the point? And it's just PR. That was kind of some of the criticisms that were happening when it first started out. I think it came around in 2007.
I mean, it's evolved. I mean,
Yeah.
it has definitely evolved over time. And, again, not to go back through the whole history of it, but, we remember how it was formed in the beginning, right? There were 7 people or whatever the heck the number was. Whoever was the top vote getter was the chairman. Okay. There was
came
a
later, but yeah.
All right, maybe that. Like basically the voice of the CSM funneled through an individual to another individual over on the CCP side. And that's the way kind of information went back and forth. It wasn't a group thing of like, y'all get to talk.
Yeah, it was like a labor leader in negotiations and stuff. And that's when people got interested in it, because they're like, ooh, something to win. So they could be that conduit and stuff. And I think that conduit was Minxie at first, very popular PvPer at the time. She's totally like stepped back and created a whole nother way of playing EVE Online with other people like Johnny Sparks.
Johnny Splunk.
Spelunking, right? Not Sparks. I'm thinking of his animation.
The funny story behind that is that he misspelled spelunk.
Oh, that's
funny. It was supposed to be spelunk.
Yeah, spelunking. Wormhole diving.
Yeah,
spelunking. Yeah.
Yeah,
but
actually,
anyways,
too was one of the originators of that group.
When you were saying before you were afraid of the CSM messing things up, I happen to like the CSM. I think that it is imperfect, but it is better than not having it. But you should also probably not give as much credence, perhaps, as a lot of people try to, of the level of influence that they have. They try their best to influence on behalf of the player base, okay, or on behalf of what they believe the player base to be. But I would say virtually everything that CCP puts out, you got to put on CCP, not on what the CSM did or did not do in the process, because they just don't have that level of veto power or power at all.
Yeah. But but here's
you
the thing.
hope maybe they can influence at the fringes, but don't think for a minute that they're driving vision.
I feel like if CCP puts something out and it fails, I'm actually okay with that. They're trying things. They're experimenting. If I feel CSM puts something out, I'm very suspicious. That's just an innate like feeling that what do
you mean they put something out there?
If they really influence something, and they have recently, right? Like if you think about it, last year, what happened? They went to the first summit and they said, yeah, we weren't really listened to, and devs kind of didn't talk to us, and blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't really a good summit. We came back and it started to happen again. And then, then we went out that night and at dinner, we talked to the devs and we said, look, if you don't want us here, we're going to take off right now. And then it was a great summit. Then all of a sudden the sky opened up and the sunshine came out and we got good connection with them and good buy-in. I think maybe Hilmar talked to them and reassured them they were important or whatever. But all of a sudden they felt like a lot of agency, a lot of influence at that point, and all of a sudden everything was great.
Well, maybe the difference was just they felt as though they weren't even being listened to or heard, and it became where they were at least being heard, right? It doesn't mean that what they say has to be accepted by CCP. CCP has its own vision for this game and its own idea of where it wants to take it. And but this group is there to at least be heard for the feedback that separates the signal from the noise of the general player base, right?
Yeah, there's a really loud player base out there, and I can see CSM as a filter for that. That they don't have to go out and touch Reddit. They can actually just get it from the guys that read Reddit that are on CSM or something. And I appreciate that, because it's there's a lot of noise to signal ratio problems with masses of players all talking, all having different opinions and stuff like that.
Yeah. Somebody mentioned that in the committee. They were like, well, why don't we just use Reddit in the forums? And I was like, yeah, that's
You haven't read
CCP's.
I
They're
think
gonna hey, let's talk about faction warfare. It's pretty big on our priority list. Where do we find the feedback from the players? Oh, I know, Reddit. Hang on.
Let me go get that.
Fuck
The
you.
worst
It doesn't
thing.
matter.
Well, I mean, look, there's kind of two things, right? I think that people who do go and take the time to post thoughtful, sort of well thought out kind of dissertations or whatever out, whether it be Reddit, whether it be on the forums, there is a chance, whether it be an article in one of the Eve media sites or something like that, there is a reasonable chance that somebody from CCP will see that and perhaps pass it on to let's say the dev that might be interested in reading it, right? One liners and short paragraphs and shit like that are going to go by the wayside. They do read things out there. They do follow the Eve media and whatnot. But it's good for them to have at least a body of players that they can go to and say, okay, look, we can speak to you about this because we've set up this mechanism where you're under NDA. Therefore, we can actually say stuff back to you, and then you can give us feedback on that, right? A back and forth kind of conversation that they can't really have out there just in public.
Mm.
the other thing is that this is not as an either or prospect, right?
Mhm.
And these things synergize with one another. So they have all these different tools. They have the forums. They can tell how many individual accounts are posting on any given forum thread. I remember back when the Erotica 1 incident happened in particular, they had a mega thread that was huge, but then they were able to show that like 90% of the comments came from like 20 people total or something like that. They have Reddit, which actually does have some pretty decent feedback, and the devs do definitely spend some time paying attention to it. And you know this by the number of times that a dev will respond to something in Reddit, which is very frequently. You have Twitter, which is a pretty good active communication line, although not really good for capturing things. You have the bug system, and you have the CSM. You have all these different avenues of communication to lead up into CCP. And you have podcasts, right?
Let's not
And so
forget Twitch. It's
and
extremely
Twitch
important.
and
Discord.
and all the different discords. And so each one of these tools provides a different lens into the situation, right? Like a good example actually would be Twitch. So Twitch is probably the most raw version because you can watch a new player going through the game that doesn't know anything, struggling, watching people help them, and learn a lot about what does and doesn't make sense about Eve. And that's not something that you're going to learn just by reading forum posts because people aren't really good at communicating those kinds of blockers for them. But meanwhile, if it has to do with how acceptable a feature is, like for instance, if the gong meme goes on for more than a few days on Reddit, you might want to consider just not having a gong.
I want to hit on something because it was something I wanted to say a little while ago, but Buttercup almost kind of brought it back to me. And that what Buttercup said was, and yet we still have FuzzySoft. And that's something I want to bring up for those people out there that talk about broad diversification on the CSM. We don't have it. We've got a nullsec dominated CSM, so only nullsec stuff is happening. And I threw this question out to somebody the other day, basically saying, for all the talk of nullsec domination, right? And what influence that they must have had in some way, right? Which influence are you talking about? Do we think that even with a sitting nullsec dominated CSM, we have had FuzzySoft, we have had supercapital proliferation, we have had Citadel spam proliferation, and all these? Do we really think that the CSM has that much influence when these things that we know nullsec people have been like, wait a second, when are you going to fix this?
What's funny is that if you look at the feedback that was given prior to FuzzySoft, right? If you look at the complaints and the formulas and the things that were requested about nullsec prior to the FuzzySoft and Aegis changes, FuzzySoft and Aegis almost perfectly answers the problems and the complaints and the solutions that were provided prior to that. It is straight up farms and fields. It is all of that kind of stuff. Balkanization is just over time. Well, like the problem is that any kind of solve is going to be work. And so no matter what the solution is, it's going to be in one way or another unpopular. And so I think it's interesting, and this is not just true about FuzzySoft. There are lots and lots of features I see in Eve in which the feedback now seems to not understand what was the problems that were being solved when this solution was originally implemented.
Well, all right, let's move on. New skins. You guys see the Erebus got
yeah,
police skins.
So this is a big one, and this actually just came up in our chat the other day because we have a guy who's huge into Logi but was out of the game for a little while, came back and was like, hey, how do I get an emergency responder skin? And I was like, so 1 month last year, if you wanted to, you could have bought it for Plex. Now you have to pay a huge amount of money or a huge amount of ISK on the market to buy it from somebody who did. And I have no idea whether or not it'll ever come out again. So here we go. Police skins for the Hyperion, the Erebus, and a whole bunch of other stuff for actually not very much. But if you look, it is also very limited. I think it's only a month. And so once again, these are going to be skins that will probably skyrocket because these are very attractive, awesome skins for various different things that are well played by the player base. And so as soon as these are no longer available, there are going to be people that go, I want a Hyperion police skin. How do I get that? And you're like, well, you just pay me $5 billion.
How do we feel about this limited availability for many skins?
I feel like they should bring them on back like sometime.
By the way, like Roderick,
I definitely think they should shift back the skins sometimes and not just keep them limited one time only.
Well,
like
the
Roderick's-
argument is that
Hold
by
on.
having this skin, it means that I played the game at this time.
Roderick's
Right, but if you
suggestion-
go ahead.
I'm going to eat my mic. Roderick's suggestion there, I just want to squeeze it in because I think it's kind of cool, is add skins to LP store. And then go ahead and talk about the merits of Scarcity.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, adding skins to an LP store. But one of the things I think is when you have skins and they're limited available and people are sitting on them, obviously they're not activated. That's the thing. They're not using them. They're just sitting on them for ISK. So they're not actually being used for the intentional purpose. They're being used.
But that's okay, right? Like this is...
Right, I'm just saying, but it's a limited time thing only that's not being used for its intentional purpose.
But here's
like
the problem.
collecting
A lot of people do
spoons.
activate the skins.
I mean, I'd say I use my emulator all the time, but I really don't.
But like my old roommate, he sells skins, and he's like, "Oh, just made 4 billion this today, sold 2."
I think totally legitimate because there should be more ways to invest in EVE Online. I think those are like buying what do they call them, silver coins or coins from the government or something, that they have no actual value, but they're decorative and they can increase in value because scarcity affects that, and that might be a good way to actually make some money for people who want to do that. Whether it's seen or not, I think has nothing to do with it. In fact, the less it's seen, the more valuable it becomes, I assume.
I think that's a good...
We would benefit from scarcity if the skins that were available for only one time, for a day or a month or whatever it is, if those were specific, commemorative, or if event related or something like that, as opposed to this is just a cool skin, it's really cool, you should get it because it's cool. Like don't make that limited.
Some are, right? The ones that are memorial are limited, or the ones that are fundraising are limited. But
one of the things I would say is like you have to look at it from the other side. Players are profiting off this, but how much would CCP be profiting off it and adding to their income if you could just buy the skin for the price rather than I'm buying it for a huge amount?
Interesting question, but it depends on demand drivers. If something is feared to be rare, maybe one person buys 100 of them instead of 50 people buying one of them because it's not rare. It totally depends on the motivation of scarcity.
So, okay, here's the problem. First of all, it is a collectible, which means the limited release of it is what gives it its value, right? So if they were to ever do any of these availabilities again, they will shake the faith in the purchasing of those items, right? Because if they announced that you could get the emergency skin for another week, the price of the emergency skins will be it will be slashed in half within a few hours, probably, right? So unless it's some super hard way of getting it. So what that means is that when somebody purchases a bunch of skins from CCP, they're doing it because they are betting on the fact that it'll retain its value. And if that faith is shaken, then less people will do that. And the chances are that more people buy them to stockpile them and sell them over time than would buy them just in general throughout the course of events, right?
Well, yeah.
And so it's possible that that contract is more valuable, that contract with the purchasers, that this skin will remain valuable and will continue to gain in value. That contract is more important than the actual like skin in the game. And the problem is that those skins have to be some of the best skins in the game, because they only occur when somebody looks through it and goes, oh man, I want an emergency responder skin. How do you get that? Oh, well, now you have to just buy it from a player, right? If the best skins in the game were the ones that could be purchased by Plex, then people wouldn't even bother with the ones that the players were selling.
By the way, the 64-bit client's going to make skins have a whole new life, I think, because now you're going to be able to zoom in and
absolutely
really see
So
what they look like.
the secondary part of this, and the huge elephant in the room, is that if you were to try to reintroduce these skins in some way, the most likely way to do it would be through loot boxes, right?
Oh,
you
no.
would no, yep. if you wanted to reintroduce them,
I didn't
and
say
keep
it.
their
It was
rarity.
Asterathi, okay?
Matterall, you
Oh,
already
no.
thought something.
Hey,
Back
this is
off.
the problem. Hey,
I-
no, this is the problem. Listen to me, because this is the real thing. This is the real thing.
Yeah.
If you want to reintroduce these things into the game, but maintain their scarcity and their importance, the only way to do it is through some sort of random function. Either it introduced as part of like a random reward for doing agency stuff, or dev caravans filled with skins, or introducing it to hacking sites. Some sort of random element which ultimately results in what could be construed as loot boxes would be essential to be able to put these back into the game without causing it to tank its own value.
I don't
Well,
think
if
that's
it
a
were-
bad
if-
suggestion.
If
by
it
the
was
way,
an effort, if it was an in-game only effort-based thing, then yeah, I'd be fine for that. But like, if it's like, God forbid, fucking pay, cash only loot boxing kind of thing, that's
If you
just
can,
that'll
if
be
you
the
can buy
worst
them with
thing.
ISK, then that means that there's money involved. But
Uh,
if you do stuff in game, that's a different story.
Dunk says that that's already happening with firewall breach skins. I think that's
What
what
happened with
the
a whole bunch of the really old skins that they kind of removed? They one of the events that everybody could get involved with basically allowed you to get skins as a reward. They were like the ones that were some of the like really old ones that they were discontinuing and such. But
Yeah, and
Exoplanet for life.
there are degrees to
Yeah.
this, right? Like the lowest degree would be, okay, they show up in hacking sites, or maybe you buy LP, you buy the loot box, quote unquote, with LP, and then you open it up and see what skin you get. And depending on which LP store you do, you get, it might decide what kinds of skins you might get in the various loot boxes. All the way up to you have to buy the loot boxes on for Aurum. And then open them, which would be awful. And then, of course, the worst one would be you get the loot box in game as a drop, but must buy the key in order to open it, and that would be the
fuck
worst.
that.
And I would hate it. And yeah, absolutely. But my point is that
yeah, you insult
all
the
of those are
audience.
technically loot boxes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the thing of it is, it's kind of interesting. There's a parallel here, right? Like when the players decided that Technetium was, and this is about 2012, 2011, that Technetium was the ingredient that had the most common with most T2 elements. They said, that's what we need to lock up. Let's create a monopoly on Technetium. And they went to other groups like NC Dot and Goons actually made this agreement with PL. I believe Test was part of it because they had some moons in the south, but in the north it was basically those guys. And they basically said, we're going to control this moon mineral, technetium, and we were going to suppress supply and slowly let it out so we can regulate the price, et cetera, et cetera. And then Fozzie gets hired at CCP, and the first thing he does is create alchemy, which allows you to take different moon minerals and create technetium if you needed it, or you could create whatever you need to. He created recipes where you could take different things to create the thing that you were missing because it was bottlenecked by players, and it destroyed Tech2's monopoly. So if you think about it,
alchemy already existed. He just expanded it into technetium.
Okay, so thank you for that correction. Yeah. So what's interesting is that seems to be the same thing with the pay to win, the loot boxes, and all the stuff that CCP puts in there, right? Like if they put in this stuff saying, hey, if you pay for this thing, then as long as there's a way for you to get it in game, that's kind of the release, right? The valve that allows that from becoming too untenable a system.
Correct. You can never say that you can't get something by in-game effort, because no matter what, you can just buy it through ISK, which can be gotten through in-game effort. It's literally their wild card, and they've been using it since the days that they introduced Plex.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. There's an interesting parallel there between those two things. Hey, thanks, Uwe.
I didn't get parallel, but
it is interesting. It is interesting how much that narrative that Eve is pay to win because Plex is a thing has really taken hold, especially in the last few months. I've noticed that argument being made a lot more, and I find it interesting.
Make the argument so people know what we're talking about.
So this idea that like Eve has gained this reputation that it's just this free to play, pay to win, jerk fest, because basically anybody can throw a bunch of money, their wallet at the screen, and suddenly be the best pilot in the best ship doing the best stuff. And what confuses me about that is because for years, I'd say prior to skill injectors, whenever the argument that Eve was pay to win was brought up, the simple counter argument was, no, if you pay money, if you just throw money at the game, then all you're doing is becoming a more expensive kill mail, right? Because if you just buy if you go, oh, well, I can't do this in my destroyer, therefore I'm going to, bling out a faction thing with purple mods. Well, guess what? That's not actually going to get you across the finish line. That's just going to make your loss even more hilarious, right? And for some reason with skill injectors, we've decided that doesn't count, as if somebody can skill inject into the best ship in the game and then suddenly be the best pilot in the game. And that just isn't true. It still isn't true, right? A week one pilot that injects into a roll pilot, that dude's the guy who's getting killed by all these whalers over and over again, right? They don't know how to fly. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what D-scan is. They're still just sitting ducks. I don't believe in this pay-to-win thing.
I think that the thing about skill injectors isn't people skilling into Rorquals necessarily. It's people skilling into like supers and titans, and they're multi-boxing those things and they're just dropping them on people, and that's why some people coin it as paid, because it's if you're out and you're roaming in your cruiser gang and somebody just drops fucking 6 titans and they're a 4 day alt, it's kind of like that's pay to win.
Let me just include some of the chat guys here, like Freelancer 117. It says, Matterall, if you disallow betting in and outside of Eve, they will not have loot boxes, or else they will be hypocrites.
I believe that CCP should absolutely implement gambling in Eve. Like I am actually frustrated by the fact that CCP has not come back and basically brought back some of those gambling.
The issue that I have with gambling. Sorry, dude. The issue that I have with like CCP bringing gambling into EVE Online is the fact that they would have to in some way make a foolproof system that stops minors from being able to participate in that.
Dirk says, but the children.
I mean, somebody's got to say
it. That is the main thing. That like is both morally wrong and also in many different countries, including a few European countries, actually illegal.
So,
Yeah.
just a quick question: how did the European countries handle Magic the Gathering?
I don't know. I'd have to look it up.
Why? Make your point.
Because I mean, not only is Magic the Gathering literally gambling and loot boxes in itself, but there's this GDC talk from 2011 called "What Can Video Games Learn from CCGs," which is the creepiest video I have ever watched in game design. And you can watch it and you can see the birth of all of this, because they basically are talking about the Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon market model, and how
Well,
the card game system influences and reinforces the buying of packs,
hold on,
which
Dirk.
leads back.
Dirk, you're with me on this one, but buying Star Wars cards in 1977 with a stick of gum.
Yeah.
It was like dry.
Oh, baseball cards. I think it was a Ray out there that said baseball cards,
Yes.
and
Robbie,
So
Robbie Bird.
you can basically say draw the parallels between buying those cards and stuff like that back in the baseball cards and all that kind of stuff, because you never knew exactly what you would get in those cards,
You get
those
duplicates
pack of
all the
cards when
time.
you bought them.
Yeah, and then you get to
Like,
trade the duplicates.
Yeah. So you could kind of say it's just an electronic version of that. That wasn't gambling, or that wasn't considered gambling. Well, maybe that wasn't considered gambling because nobody actually looked into it too heavily, or didn't look into the effects that it had on children.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not saying that it shouldn't be looked at when it comes to these collectible card games. I'm just saying that to attack one on a legal basis without attacking the other seems to be misguided. Not just because they're similar, but because the design literally was transferred from one to the other.
Well, they should
I'm
have
not
stopped
joking
it.
when I say that this is the birth, because
Yeah.
it was a Magic the Gathering dude teaching the top game designers in the world how to implement these kinds of principles into the game, which is literally loot boxes and free to play mechanics.
just a real quick. I'm sorry, I just got to address it real quick. Hostrika says, talking in stations, 2 pilots of equal skill. One pays out the ass, the other doesn't. Who wins? How is that not pay to win? There is nothing that you can buy for real money that gives you the advantage. Now, if what you're saying is you can buy something that you can then trade for ISK, and then look, some dude can go out there and be a miner and mine stuff and get ISK to buy mods.
I'll
Like,
disagree.
every mod in this game is able to be purchased by everybody else using just normal in-game mechanics.
On a micro level, yes. On a macro level, I don't know, because you had an who was the aluminum tycoon?
You have a supply and demand situation.
Hold on, let me finish my point, please. You have an aluminum tycoon, right, who bought Red. It wasn't Red Alliance, it was the other one. Red Overlord. Yeah, bought their entire super capital fleet, and so they became an instant super capital power based on real money infusion by one guy who decided to sponsor that group. Is that not a destabilizing move, or is that not pay to win in some way?
I don't know. Where's Red Alliance?
I mean,
I was
so
going to say, where's Red Overlord these days?
I wouldn't call it destabilizing, but it definitely was a move.
Certainly not destabilizing, no, not destabilizing to the game, because the game overcame it, right? Red Overlord's dead, spread out.
And that's the point. Like yes, you could throw way too much money at trying to get some of these powerful things, but ultimately, in the long run, that isn't going to make it. And to the question of 2 people of equal power or equal skill buying the stuff, that is an unusually big ask in EVE. The idea that 2 players would be of equal skill, and there's a lot of things in EVE that would make 2 players of equal skill not be equal in power, and that's part of what EVE is all about: is who has the best trick up their sleeve, right? And so I would argue that the player that spends a bunch of money on their problems is not going to be the player with the better skill.
I think the real argument here is not what ISK does for the players. It's that in-game effort as opposed to out-of-game effort. It's that when I work at a job in real life and make money, that generates more ISK per hour than game activity. So everything
Yeah.
is purchasable with ISK. Everybody can win when they get the ISK. It's just a matter of I can do it in less time than you because I have more real world money than you, and that is the destabilization.
But maybe somebody else has more time and therefore can accrue more in-game wealth by doing the things in game.
Well,
Yeah, I
it's
totally
actually it's a symbiotic relationship there, because you don't automatically get ISK by getting Plex. You have to sell that Plex on the market to somebody who has ISK. So it is a
Right.
symbiotic relationship there.
Like me, I live in Japan and I work from like 6 a.m. until like 9:30 at night. So
Wow.
when I play Eve, I'm not grinding. I'm just PvPing. I take my income, I buy a bit of Plex, and I deck out all my ships. You know, it's like 14 bill worth of Plex a month, and I get all my ships and I go PvP because I don't have time to grind.
And
And
it's not an uncommon story.
and what that has allowed for is allowed for you to basically buy these Plex things, right? Sell them to get your game income that you need to do these other things. While on the other side of the transaction is somebody who has spent their time getting their game income to buy the game time from you.
Right.
Yeah.
And at the same time, though, when you ask the question, who two players of equal skill, one can buy their income and the other can't, who is the better pilot, you know? And it's kind of like I don't want to talk lower about the people who can't afford to buy Plex with real currency, but the fact that I don't have to spend my time grinding, and the fact that every day I get to jump into PvP and hone my skills because I don't have to worry about grinding, I don't have to worry about losing a ship because I have the income to back it up. It kind of fights that argument a little. Sorry.
And I just do want to go back to the beginning, because a lot of times terms are like thrown around out there. Okay, and I really do believe that pay to win is one of those terms that people try to blanket over all kinds of things. And I just want to go out to a quick definition here of pay to win.
Yeah.
In some games, players who are willing to pay for special items or downloadable content may be able to gain advantage over those playing for free who might otherwise need to spend time progressing in order to unlock said items. That is not what goes on in EVE Online. We're not talking about special items. We're not talking about even gold ammo, let alone gold weapons or gold other mods or gold ships or things of that nature.
Unless you're talking about Tech 2. If you're talking about Tech 2, I'd totally buy it.
Well, I mean, isn't that what Triglavian ships are? An effort to monetize? Like,
what?
They're only open to Omegas, right? The Triglavian ships.
To be able to fly them, or to be
Yeah.
able to.
I mean, I guess.
Oh, that's
And I mean,
interesting.
like
guess
they're
so.
they're slowly getting more and more OP, and it's kind of, I don't want to say it's pay to win,
Well,
but the chances of
you're
me
just-
in a T2 destroyer beating
Subscription.
Kikimora.
I'm sorry, we are just not
tier.
going to translate pay to win to.
I think it's very
Pay
interesting.
for a normal
I'm
subscription.
just saying.
It is an interesting thing, though.
You can pay for your subscription in game. I'm just saying, but if
Yeah,
somebody
that's true.
already has a T1 Kikimora ship versus your T1, alpha account ship, the chances of you winning are significantly less. I mean, there's still a probability, but I think if somebody has a Triglavian ship, they're probably gonna beat your ass.
Okay, so don't.
Triglavian ship and the Omega that is required both come from ISK that can be earned in game.
Dunk
Right.
says
And
pay
I
to
don't
win
dis-
does not equal expensive. What do you guys think of that?
I don't
comment?
dispute that.
Look, I think it's what we're talking about is equipment gated by actual money paid to the developer, right? That's what people don't want.
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. Shall we move on to Pride Week or month?
Does it even exist in Japan? I haven't seen anything.
Japan? I don't know.
Pretty closeted country over here.
Is it?
Yeah. I think it's still
Oh.
illegal.
Oh, well, some parts of the United States too. We're talking about being
Wow.
Or at least the marriage aspect of it is illegal. I wouldn't say being gay is illegal. I'm just saying I think marriage in Japan isn't legal yet.
Oh well, someday. Okay. Jesus, no appetite for
Eve
this
Toronto
topic.
is
Pride existed before gay marriage, so whatever.
Yeah.
Federalist
Eve
pigs.
Toronto is the same weekend as the Pride Parade.
What's that? Yeah. You're gonna have Eve North on Pride weekend over there, right?
Pride Week.
Yeah.
Toronto's
Well,
Toronto's got a
on
huge
that
Pride festival.
day, that weekend is when the parade is.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay. So what happened with Talking in Stations is that I looked at it and I was like, "Ooh, it's Pride Week." I didn't realize it was, and so boom, we put up a Pride Week.
Month.
Pride
It's an
month.
entire month, by the way.
Okay, I was just thinking about LA. Sorry. Pride month, month. The whole 30 days, 31 days, is celebrating Pride and gay or GLA. What is it? GLBT.
LGBT.
It's like an alphabet soup, man.
It changed when I was in college. It was GLAD or something like that. It's changed because it's including more and more people, I think, which kind
It's
of
an organization.
Yeah.
Jesus, if you're not going to get it right.
Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender.
Yep.
Yeah.
People are often adding Q at the end for queer, which is kind of a catch-all.
And just a couple Q's in there.
Well, I don't know what that means.
There's a bunch of other.
Yeah. Queer just means I don't conform, essentially.
Yeah, one of the cool things is when I was going to like futurist conventions in LA, and one of them, by the way, they're very dark, dystopic. What do you call it? Conventions. If you go to them, they're very dark and depressing because the future is so bleak. But this is back in the 1990 or so, and it was one of the speakers they were all professors from different places, and one of them was talking about gender and how gender would become incredibly complex because gender is complex. We've just kept it very simple. There's a man, there's a woman, and that's it. And that's like as much as information as people want at the time and before. And she is absolutely correct that it was going to become much more complicated, much more of a spectrum. So it's really neat to see that kind of open up, at least in the world dialogue as it's happening now, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, so I saw an opportunity to say, yeah, that's a nice value, and we'll put it up. I also thought this is a very safe thing to do. Like nobody would be upset at this. So we put it up, and then we animated it as a flag.
My sweet summer child.
Yeah. So it was very cool. Yeah, like to me, it's a non-issue. It's like a non-issue. And then we had a few people decide that was an issue for them, and so some of them left and said they'll be back later, and it's fine. They can.
Did they really?
Just two.
Like
people.
They literally said that, or you
two
just
people said.
Yep.
They left. Only two have actually said that they left because we put the GLBT
which would be highly indicative of the fact that what the vast majority of people out there are like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean okay with it. I just mean like okay, like it's just sort of one of those things. Like Eve Online on Twitter today, I believe it was today. Their little Twitter logo or whatever, has gone to the gay pride, and they put out a tweet about inclusivity and things like that. Which I'm going to tell you. I think we have a community that is generally pretty damn inclusive. Of things that go even way beyond LGBT and pride and things like that, and perhaps some of those other things need to be highlighted as well. Although I think it's a little more difficult. But
well, I think one of the funny things is because my wife, she's very conservative, so here I am, playing Eve, and I'm just got off work, so I'm just shirtless in my boxers playing Eve, and like. There it is on my screen. I got two monitors, and one says like "Gay Pride" with a rainbow flag. And she's like, "What are you doing?
Why are you in your boxers, shirtless, looking at gay pride stuff?"
It kind of. I could see why some people probably don't want it on their screen, just to kind of avoid that conversation.
Well,
yeah.
I think that EVE Online, though, like one of the big themes about it is that no matter who you are or how rejected you are in real life, there is this alternative persona which will be accepted and on some level by some group within the game, even if you're a monster. Maybe especially if you're a monster.
Well,
but
yeah.
but
No, I think that's really
yeah, I
interesting.
mean,
Yeah.
like you'll see a lot of people, like there's quite a few very active transgender people within EVE Online, and there's a lot of openly homosexual people in EVE Online, because EVE Online is the kind of place that is about having an alternate reality and being accepted for who you are.
Or not accepted as who you are.
I've always
Because Eve is a nasty place.
I've always really liked that part of virtual worlds, is it allows a lot of people to participate when they might not have been able to participate in either dialogue, discussion, friends, chance to be loved, whatever it is that you're somewhat excluded from in real life or find it harder to achieve in real life. That virtual worlds kind of give you some remedy, and that's always been I think one of the really beautiful things about MMOs and virtual societies. But that's the romantic in me. It's also a place of pestilence and mental damage and people who are
You talking about Eve?
eating too much sugar. No, MMOs in general. They're eating too much sugar and they don't understand the power of their words, and so it becomes a very mixed environment where you have some really beautiful things and then you have some really ugly things. And I think the internet in general over the last few years has gotten particularly rank.
I think that that's a large part of the fact that, going back to the gender thing, right? Like, it's not that these problems didn't exist; it's that we had the capabilities of covering them up. And a world like with things like the internet, where people can really be unfiltered, as it were, is forcing us to come face to face with things that were just too difficult to deal with in previous generations.
Yeah, there was a lot of hiding things in the past.
I also think like the internet also gives a lot of what's the word?
Anonymity.
Yes, and that way people can say the terrible things that they say.
It also gives a serious amplification to those voices, right? A single voice in the correct community can really gain control and look like a huge influence. You'll see this. It was actually we were talking about the Eve subreddit the other day. I think it was you and me, Matterall, where we were talking about how toxic in general the attitudes there become, and I pointed out that that's because the population of the Eve subreddit is largely people who are kicked out of all of the other places. So
that was funny.
They're not happy. They're not necessarily the most happy people when it comes to CCP or EVE Online.
That's the last place they'll be tolerated. After that, who knows?
4chan.
I mean, Kugu isn't really a thing anymore, so they got to go somewhere, right?
Yeah. But I was really I was heartened because there's a couple threads there that were pretty negative on me specifically, in conjunction, not me specifically in abstract, but in conjunction to CSM or whatever, and things that I had said that were mischaracterized. But I really saw something interesting, and that was a lot of people, and I couldn't believe it. There sure was a lot of brigading, or not brigading, but a lot of piling on. But there were people who were standing up and saying like, well, that's not really what was being said here. This is, if you think about it, it was actually I was super impressed that people go into that den of fire and they're like, yeah, it's not really what he was trying to do. But I wouldn't
I like
bother
to
doing
say
it, but
I like to say that having an interesting post is the second best way to get karma on Reddit. The first best way is to prove somebody else wrong.
Well, who
I
knows?
was going to say,
interesting.
You caught a lot of flack, but I was still recommending you because of the conversation that we had about faction warfare. And like, for me, I feel like you're still connected to your audience, and it was really big for you to say, yes, we're going to, pay attention to the faction warfare group and listen to what they have to say. So when people were like, "Oh, he's gold ammo," blah blah blah, I was like, "Look, guys, he said he's gonna advocate for us, and like, that's a really big thing. Tell me the other candidates that you think are gonna advocate on our behalf." And they're just like, "Gold ammo," and I'm like, "You guys got to listen to the interview again."
Well, and not even that. I think one of the things that kind of disappointed me more were some comments that I've seen from people out there who have actually heard more from Matterall over the years than that single interview, and they too were gold ammoing the shit out of it. It's like wait a second, you actually have a perspective that you've had from before this, based on multitudes of other comments and conversations that have taken place, and you are latching onto this as well. So it kind of led me to almost believe that really what we had here was not really a focus on gold ammo. It was just your traditional, somebody with a name said something, we've got to bash that now.
I mean, I even heard of things. I even heard from people who were talking about, like, TIS, brought out a ballot this year. Like, that's news to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Wasn't my ballot.
And it's just, yeah, exactly. It wasn't my ballot. And it was just a case of like, it's people misconstruing things, right? It's just for the sake of like, having a rally cry or this, that, and the other, right? It's just...
Well, I put out a ballot,
but it's also like, yeah, I know you put out the ballot, and I corrected the person who the people who told me about it. Like, so, so at least they now know that, like, if TIS, what they heard wasn't the case.
If TIS puts out a ballot, we would put it out via the website. We would pin it inside a Discord. It would be all over the place if we put out a ballot, which I've never said is necessarily a bad thing to do. But it's not really where we're going to put our flag, I guess, as an organization. Now, separate is me.
I mean, I put my ballot on propaganda, but so did somebody else.
Yeah. That's okay. I think that's okay. That's people talking, expressing themselves through the platform. The platform is for them, and that's fine. But if TIS were to do it officially, like, we'd do it big, like.
And the thing was, we wouldn't do it. Okay, we wouldn't put out a ballot because there is no possible way whatsoever to get even the crew to agree to what a ballot should.
I was going to say, like, the amount of effort and the amount of time required to basically go through everything and get consensus on a 1 through 10 list, like, for the whole crew to be, I'm okay with this ballot kind of thing and having my name attached to it. Like, we could spend that effort and that time in a much more productive way to the community than just, here's a ballot that you can ignore.
Right.
I think we spend an entire year trying to ensure that TIS has as diverse of a viewpoint as possible, and so it'd be pretty silly to try to make us all unify on one thing. Now, that being said, if we ever do unify on one thing, you better believe that that's a pretty important thing.
Matthew, you have something you want to say as a different topic?
Yeah, I was just noticing that streams are becoming more and more popular these days, and I saw this cool app on Steam not too long ago. It's called FaceRig, and you can actually upload an avatar, and it motion captures your face and stuff. And I was talking to some of the artists that work at CCP, and apparently they already have the stuff to do this. And I've just been trying. Like, I posted in links. It's immensely hard, but if they already have the stuff to do this, will you, Matterall, as a CSM candidate, support the release of this?
Or support this. Or you, Matthew?
I can answer this question. I can answer this question for him. Yes, he will, because if he doesn't, I will bug him every freaking day until he does.
We were just talking about this, actually. Who was it, McLeod? Or I was talking about this to somebody else. Yeah.
We were talking about it, and I said, like, there is already something that you can use that basically does what you were trying to say, and I kind of pointed you towards FaceRig.
Well, I got it in links. Like right now, you can see, but I'm watching some crazy Russian tutorial. I have no idea what I'm doing, and it's so immensely complicated.
Well,
But I
that's
mean,
fine.
CCP already has the technology to release it. That's what I'm saying. They have the experience to actually give the user a chance to actually become their avatar and stream as their avatar and possibly create content that's, dare I say, 100 times better than Clear Skies.
So
I wish that
what I've
technology was out when I started, because I would have actually always done it in character rather than as my face, because now my
As the
face is
handsome
out there.
goateed man you are,
Yeah.
right?
Oh,
just
absolutely.
just so for clarification, right now you can export basically every model and its textures out of the game, and so you could like throw them into Blender and do all kinds of fun stuff. What we need is the ability to export our model avatar and its skins out of the game.
Well,
Yeah.
if you look in the links in Talking in Stations, you can see I'm trying to do it, but it's so difficult.
Which part?
In links,
The
you
ships?
see where it says Matthew. No, my character, my actual.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh,
it's like,
that's what that is. Yeah, no, it's well, did you actually pull the model out, or are you making it basically
I
by
pulled the
hand?
model. I pulled the model out, and
How?
I pulled the textures out. There's a program called Ninja Ripper, and if anybody listening
Okay,
can figure this shit out,
you
please.
get with me after
Yeah.
this and we'll see if we can figure it out together.
Yeah, talk about it after the
Yay!
show. All right, let's wrap.
It's
It'd be
2:30.
fantastic.
It's 2:30 a.m. in Japan, so
Oh, no wonder you're sitting there shirtless in your boxers.
yeah.
That image will
With my
never
gay
go away,
pride
man.
flag.
Yeah. That's right. So, Talking in Stations, we're proud to have the LGBT flag up. We'll have it for, I was going to do it just for a few days, like a week, during the election, Dirk, but you said we need to do it all month.
I'm saying if you're going to put it up during Pride Month,
It should be
you
the
should
month.
probably have it there during Pride Month. Now, which means that you should have been there on the 1st and not forgotten about it then.
Wow.
But basically my
Hey,
point was you don't take it
it's
down just because it was like in LA, because again, it's either the month or it's
Well, I was going to do it through.
It's an awareness thing, and he became aware at that particular point.
Yeah. I was going to do it through Eve North, because that's where they're going to have Pride closest to Eve Online, right? You're going to have two conventions or two things in the same city at the same time. So that was what I was thinking, and then after that, we could switch it to something else. But what we're showing off as well is that we have, because we're boosted by fans of TIS, who've given us their Nitro boost. We are boosted to the point where we can have animated logos. So we want to do different things, kind of like Google switches it every month. Then we're going to do stuff that's like seasonal, and celebrate different things, because it's an inclusive environment. We all have strong political opinions in this group. We're all intelligent people. Most of us are intelligent people in real life. And I don't think we should hide or run away from that. But we do want to make this as big a family as possible, as big a group as possible, allow different people in and stuff like that. But at the same time, protecting the integrity of the place. And I had kind of a moment where I was like, well, let me get to the core of why I began Talking in Stations, and what was it really about, and what did it become. And I told the guys in crew, look, this is where it started out. It was really just a message to my old self that was playing Eve as a medium player that had just had a year of experiences, was reading everything they could about the game and how to get good at it and stuff like that. And that guy, how do I talk to that guy? How do I talk to that guy and appeal to him? And so everything that I've done since then has been as honest as it could be, from the music that is, 80s Depeche Mode, to the style of being optimistic and friendly, most of the time, not all the time. And also not to hide opinions, right? Because we all have opinions and stuff. And Dirk and I disagree dramatically on certain things. And, I consider him a great friend in EVE Online. And a lot of us disagree on things and agree on things. And it's really funny to see like how diverse the crew at Talking in Stations is.
I like the fact that we don't agree on certain things. We can have a good conversation about it. I can learn some stuff.
Yeah. And we have a variety of players that play Eve in different ways and stuff. And that's why we're always looking for different ways of playing EVE Online. That's what we're interested in. The structure of the game and the systems that people create or are a part of that come into conflict with one another. That is good dramatic story generation. We don't like cult of personality. We don't care to build people's egos over and over and over again and that kind of stuff. And
Hey,
so
hey,
we
hey,
can-
hey now.
I mean,
except Astrothes.
I will say this.
Thank you, Raiden.
Just to give them a little bit of insight and whatnot. There was discussion about putting up the gay pride flag, given this month, but not because of that. More along the lines of I don't want to say breaking the immersion because I'm not a big fan of that kind of thing, but that Talking in Stations Discord happens to be a place where people come to generally for EVE Online related things and stuff like that, right? And there were some questions of, well, okay, how are we going to do this in such a way that we're not taking that diversion away from people and bringing them back into a real world kind of place, because there are players out there who, not that they're role playing or anything like that, but more just, hey, look, this is an escape from them.
Not breaking immersion, but breaking escapism.
And Talking in Stations is a piece of that kind of diversion from real life. So we want to make sure that we're balanced in that way too. That even if we've got something to say, that we don't feel as though this is the place that we necessarily have to say.
That's an interesting point. Don't break escapism.
But yeah, so anyways.
Really, what I've learned out of all of this is that Matterall's a bad person.
Yeah, I know. I think I've learned the same thing.
He's super reactionary.
Poor Matterall.
I thought I was a good guy, but then every once in a while,
Gold ammo.
They say if you want to learn about all your skeletons in your closet, run for office.
I'm just glad.
I've definitely experienced a change in the escapism in my own interaction and experience with EVE in the community, as I've begun streaming and as I've begun speaking out in the community. Initially, when I began playing, this was purely escape, 100%. I didn't have to worry about anything. I was anonymous. I was just a face in the crowd. I didn't have to worry. And as I turn the camera on, I get on stream, I talk a lot, people know who I am, and I'm not escaping anymore. I have to watch what I do. I have to watch what I say, and that is a concern. So that's definitely a very valid point about the escapism.
But I do want to say, because somebody brought the gold ammo thing, so we kind of circled back there a little bit. I am glad that I was able to buy up and hide the Matterall dossier that was created. Luckily, only the gold ammo part got out, but there were some other things that had it come out during the election. I'm not sure how it would have gone.
Dirk's one of those publisher friends of mine that buys stories and encapsulates them so
Kills
they can't
it.
get out. Yeah.
Literally the Inquirer.
Dirk, catch and kill McLeod. McGurk.
Oh, that's awesome. So
I bought it from Eat Onion, so whatever. It's like I don't think I really bought reality, but
yeah, their opposition research is top notch. Okay, I got to wrap up and go. I love talking with you guys. If you want, jump into public. We talk a lot all day long and hang out with us.
Can I bring up one more thing? Because it happened last night, and it started off with kind of a funny story, and we can only hit this for 5 minutes if you seriously have to go or whatever.
I'm live.
But last night there were a few of us just having I don't know, the most basic of casual conversations in Talking in Stations Discord, and all of a sudden about 10 people come into the channel, and they're saying things like but in what appeared to be Spanish, but they weren't saying a whole lot, so it was kind of hard to register what was going on. And I'm looking at the logs and I'm saying, okay, most of these people just joined the server for the first time. And I'm hitting McLeod going, dude, are we getting raided by something? Do we need to be careful of what's going on here? But we were all confused. All right. Turns out that what it was a group of players from within EVE's Spanish speaking community. All right. one of which is a member of the Discord here for some time and listens to the show and stuff like that. But they were looking for other Discords to go check out and see who was talking or whatever, and they happened to come across us. After all the confusion was over and everything, we got into a conversation about Spanish language localization. And I tell you, I haven't talked about this since French language localization came in and everybody sat there and said, hey, what about Spanish? But I think that this is something that CCP does need to address. I know that they've gotten rid of Japanese localization, which I think was wrong for whatever reasons they did it. They are now going to be adding Korean localization, which I think is kind of coming down from the parent more than anything else.
Yeah.
But Spanish localization is a big, giant, untapped market of players out there. And I believe at the time when they did French and they said not Spanish, they said because they believe that people who speak Spanish, a good portion of them also speak English. But there is a huge portion that do not. And if you want to actually begin to open up this game to a segment of the global population that is perhaps untapped at this point, you need to be looking hard at Spanish localization.
Yeah. The issue
400
is with any
million.
localization is that it's a huge technical debt to take on. And the reason why Korean localization is able to be done is because it's being managed mostly by the Pearl Abyss side of the house. That being said, I believe that you're absolutely correct, and it's a technical debt that is worthwhile, especially given the emerging South American, Central American market when it
Well,
comes
this
to
specific
MMOs and other
subject
video
was
games.
directly addressed at Eve Down Under, and they spoke about the technical debt that was required to maintain the Japanese localization and why they, stopped doing it.
And Hilmar presented at the Pearl Abyss presentation at E3 and hung the Korean localization on part of their partnership with Pearl Abyss.
Okay.
They called it partnership.
Okay, but you can't ignore the fact 400 million people speak Spanish in the world, and a lot of them are sci-fi fans. And a lot of them do.
It's true.
They go to great lengths to play EVE Online. There's a whole bunch of people who speak Spanish and don't speak English that play EVE Online, and they do it with a great deal of trouble, but they still do it. And that's the tip of the iceberg if you think about it.
It really breaks my brain why there can't be some sort of mechanism to help get the translation easier, given the fact of how much just creative stuff our community does all the time.
Matthew, you speak Spanish?
Sí, pero solo la sábados y domingo.
Oh my God.
See, that was pretty good.
That wasn't Spanish. That was like Homer Simpson Spanish. I'm just kidding.
Which is why it sounded good to me.
I don't know.
Right.
I'm a little turned on.
No, me llamo Mateo.
He got past C.
Oh.
Got to count for something.
You can speak Spanish there. That was Spanish.
Yeah, but I mostly speak I know more Japanese than I know Spanish.
That's really cool, man. Those are very different languages.
Very, very different.
But anyways, yeah, I just wanted to bring that up because that did happen last night here in Talking in Stations and sort of reinvigorated the thought in my head that I just don't understand. I get the whole technical debt thing, and I get how the technical debt thing and the complexity of it as it relates to the island of Japan. Okay, might be something where they sat there and said, we've had this localization here for this long. We're not seeing a great number of players from there. Maybe it's not worth it monetarily. I don't think that is the same situation when you're talking about the Spanish language globally. From Spain to everything south of the United States border.
Well, I think,
almost everything south. I get those places
and
that
in
speak
Europe.
Portuguese.
Yeah.
I do want to say Japan's starting to gain traction within the EVE Online community, specifically within the Alliance Siege Green. I think Rist Ozuwara is he's a streamer and a YouTuber, and he makes a lot of the EVE Online videos, and he actually takes the new videos that CCP releases and he adds Japanese subtitles to them and uploads them to YouTube for the Japanese community to see. And I think he's a really big part of the Japanese community, and I think CCP should probably have some words with him. And also, they should probably make EVE Online the anime, and then they will probably see Japanese numbers sky.
Same game, different graphics.
It'll be interesting to see as this Eve Echoes thing goes off, to see whether or not what that population is going to look like, what those demographics are going to look like, how much crossover there's going to be. Are there going to be players that are tired of the fact that they're only starting now in Eve, and so an idea of starting over? You know, people made the joke about WoW Classic. In a lot of ways, or Eve Classic rather, in a lot of ways, this Eve Echoes thing could potentially function as an Eve Classic, as it were, for some people.
Well, we'll see. Well, Matthew, I'm still shocked you speak Spanish, man. That's awesome.
Oh, my dad's Puerto Rican, so.
Oh well, no
Oh,
wonder.
see?
I'm mostly,
Yeah.
but I mostly learned it from my grandmother and my grandfather. But it kind of got what my mom's white, so it kind of like
It got
took a
erased.
while for me to learn Spanish. Yeah, and then I moved to Japan and I picked up Japanese, and that's kind of like my main language now, other than English.
Oh, that's wild. I'm sorry I said that's not Spanish. I just wanted to make a joke. Your Spanish was
It's
funny.
fine, dude.
Yeah.
I don't mind.
I was just trying to be funny.
After last night, how you were talking about your Spanish not being all that great
Oh, yeah,
compared to
my-
the people that you were talking to.
I sound like a surfer. When I go to Mexico, I'll be like, well, can you saber si puedo-" and they'll be like, what? I speak English, you know. Like they don't even try with me in Spanish. And I'm like, hey, I'm insulted. I speak Spanish. They're like, nope, not really. And I've asked people, and they sound, oh, you sound like a Californian surfer in Spanish. So yeah, all right.
As long as you get the message across.
I do, but my Spanish is all messed up because I grew up within a Mexican household. So my Spanish was Mexican Spanish growing up, and it wasn't that strong to begin with because it was really only my parents. My brothers were all speaking English. And then when I got to college, it was weird. I grew up in the Central Valley of California, which is basically like growing up in Texas. So you have a lot of conservatives, right? So being Mexican and speaking Spanish was just completely looked down upon most of the time. So I grew up with a very hidden, like, yeah, okay, I'm Mexican, but I'm really, I'm just like anybody else. Then I went to Santa Cruz University of California in Santa Cruz. And all of a sudden, if you spoke Spanish, you were like gold. Like every girl was like, wow, your Spanish is amazing. You're from this neat culture. And it was just like, I went from 0 to 100 overnight. Totally different
People
environment.
don't speak Spanish.
Is that when you got the goatee?
Te
Yeah,
pareces
then I
un
grew the
burro.
look.
Te casarías conmigo?
Yeah.
Oh my God, what did you say?
Yes.
I said, you look like a donkey. Will you marry me?
That's funny, Apollyon, but I'm not repeating it.
Well, anyway, so it totally switched and became crazy. So then I came to Los Angeles to work in film. Actually, I worked in actual film, physical production for about 4 years when I first got to LA. I don't know if I said this, but I was actually, if you guys have heard of, and I think you might have, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven. I was his assistant for a while when I first got to LA. That was like my first gig, and then it was all downhill. And when I was in LA, I was meeting people from all over Latin America. So I was my Spanish was getting influenced by all these different accents and word choices. And then later on, I had a whole group of Spaniards that I was friends with that would come in, and they taught me like a whole different selection of words and intonations and stuff like that. And then I married an Argentinian woman, and so all of a sudden, it's like my Spanish is a complete mess. My word choices are weird, and some of them are very archaic, and my Spanish is just a disaster now. But there you go. We're rated by Spanish, and I hope Eve is rated by Spanish too, and we can create localizations for the potential of 400 million possible new recruits to Eve Online, which would be...
It's a big emergent market.
Yeah.
Well, I think that what you just described raises an entirely different issue of how
Dialects.
would they localize it based on dialects. You say 400 million, but really it's not. It's much more subdivided than that, and we would have to come up with some way to make everyone comfortable at once. Or
Well,
at least
We use
understandable.
Castilian and just let everybody adapt to it.
I think
You could
that
do
part of
that,
the
yeah.
problem is that we have such a high standard for what localization means for us, right? Because there's a lot of text in Eve.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice, if the perfect wasn't the enemy of the good, and we could localize UI elements without necessarily having to worry about localizing all of the missions in the game, for example.
Yeah. Well, I to your point, François, I think if you do Spanish and you could do proper Spanish, everybody knows that. You don't have to use the slang and stuff like that. But that's what I was talking about. And what I mean by localized Spanish words is everybody has different, because of different Native American or Native South American, Native North American tribes or Mesoamerican. Vegetables are different names. Plants have different names, but that's because they're more regional. But yeah, so there are differences, but not necessarily in science fiction.
I think that there are two things in this game that should be localized for every single language in the world, and that is Warp 2 and Jump. I think that those should be in
Yeah.
every language possible.
You could just
so that people know. We might be able to reduce the number of lemmings, because I always feel bad when somebody says Warp 2 and people who may not understand Warp 2 Jump.
I would think a line
They get called lemmings.
Well, the thing is, you don't have to translate everything either. You could just say like El Drifter.
Desbamba makes a point: make everything Icelandic, and then let's figure out Eve again.
That's resetting Eve, vanilla Eve all over again. All right, that's all we have time for. We will see you tonight or later today when Artemis and Ron and Silver have Talking in Stations in the evening, so check that out. You'll hear that on podcasts. Thank you guys for showing up and hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. Thank Raiden especially for all the help that he's given Talking in Stations in the past, and thank all these guys that are in here too.
Are y'all coming over?
Yeah, can we raid?
Yep, I've been up.
Okay, let's do this again. Ash Dorothy is on a roll. He did amazing just in time.
Yeah. Yep. It is Thursday, so we are going all day, and I think I haven't confirmed this, but I think we're doing a high drag tonight too.
Oh, awesome. Okay. Cool. Well, okay, we'll see you guys later on. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. Here you go.
Thanks, Matterall.
Enjoy the raid.
All right, we might as well jump up to public in case.
And my new raid animation is amazing, so if you want to come over early so that way you can see it, it's awesome.
Yeah. Let's see. People need to do something, or
no, you just have to do the /raid, and then they just have to not do something.
If they do nothing, they'll follow.
It's going right now.
Okay, yeah, I hit raid. Terrific. We'll see you guys in public channel, and we'll talk the rest of the day. Later, guys. Bye.